Hey, how are you?
Good, thank you. How are you?
I am fantastic. If you want to just take a moment and kind of introduce yourself to us, that would be great.
Perfect. Yes. My name is Afua Ofori-Darko. I'm originally from Midland, Michigan, and went out to school in Boston, where I'm currently living. And I work in healthcare right now. So that's a little bit about me. I don't know if you want anything more than that.
No, no, that's great. I didn't know you were in healthcare right now. Wow, okay.
Yep.
I bet that's been interesting.
Yes. We've been very, very busy to say the least. The last couple years have kept us on our toes.
Yeah, yeah. Wow. Well, thank you for all that you do in regards to that for sure. My first question for you is share a moment that changed you in some way.
Yeah. I don't I want to say this is not one specific moment, but I think
Yeah.
the very transformative experience you could say. It sounds very cliche, but I think college was a very transformative experience for me. One being in the sense that I think growing up in Midland, I had grown up in, we say the Midland bubble all the time, right? But I think I had kind of grown up in an era where a lot of people looked the same, and I hadn't really experienced, what it was like to have a very truly diverse experience. And so going to
Mhm.
college was really interesting because one, I met kids who, were from the top 1%. I also met kids who from the bottom 1%. I met kids who, their first time in America was, in college right now. And, I was talking to them
Mhm.
about, higher education and, what that meant to them was so different than what it meant to me. Right. In addition to that, in college, I had the chance to study abroad in both Shanghai, China, and also in Sydney, Australia. So, kind of getting that just that
Oh,
global viewpoint was really
yeah.
something I think that changed me in quite a big way, just because I was able to see the world in a bigger scope than just from my Midland, Michigan goggles or lenses. So, I think that's one transformative thing that I've been through.
That's awesome. I encourage people so much to go outside of their little bubble, right? Because we all have our
Hmm.
bubbles, right? We all have our small communities that we kind of connect with, or our tribes, whatever you want to call them. And I always encourage people to see other things because I think it's so important to really help us understand the world a little bit better and allow us to grow. You know what I'm
Hmm.
saying?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that's amazing.
I'm so grateful for that. I think that's some of my fondest memories, I think, are times when I've been traveling and just
Mhm.
seeing the world. So
Yeah, yeah. I mean, just small things on how people can sometimes pay stuff differently, or the dialogue, or just culturally, when you eat food and how you eat food. I remember one time, someone was talking about how do I want to say it, kind of mannish or animalistic it was for a
mhm.
person to eat with their fingers. And I'm like,
Oh,
do
wow.
you understand that some parts of the world people literally eat with their fingers, and they
Mhm.
all eat together like over a bowl, and they all share it together with their
Mhm.
fingers. So, I just think we should be very careful about um, kind of discounting other practices and other ways of life because we just sometimes are just ignorant and don't know. So that's why it's important to kind of broaden it, broaden our scope, and kind of look out and see, okay, people are different, and it's a beautiful thing.
Mhm. Yeah,
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah. Okay. So my next question for you is, what's something in this life that brings you joy?
So this is actually kind of going back to what we just talked about, but traveling.
Sure.
I love to travel. I think being a first generation American, I've always been exposed to kind of the duality of my parents' heritage, of course, being Ghanaian, and then of course American culture too. But I think just having those two different viewpoints has always made me interested into what else is out there. And
Yeah.
even when we look at just Ghana, I mean, you go to Togo, neighboring country, and the culture there is so different. So I've always just been interested in various cultures, and traveling for me has been something that has really, brings me always joy just because I'm always able to see how people live differently and, see, maybe if I was born in a different country, how my life would be different. And so I love different cultures. I love, learning different languages and things like that too. So all of that is something that brings me joy.
No, I think that's beautiful that you have kind of intentionally done that. And it's so I'm glad you brought that up too about, how different countries can be so different. Because always interested me when people say, I'm going to Africa. It's like it's like Africa is
It's me
very.
how many times I've heard. I'm like, oh Lord. I'm like, well, let's be this more specific. I'm like, which country in Africa? We even just take West Africa versus East Africa, two very very different places.
Yes,
So
it
yeah,
is
I
so
hear that one a lot and cringe a bit when I hear that one.
Yeah, because I don't think people realize it's like, and it's interesting when you talk to people who are not a little versed in, differences, I guess I'll say it that way.
Mhm.
But when they say things like, Africa, and they like already have this image of it, and it's like there's so many different parts and so many different dynamics
Right.
to it. It's just different cultures within, that continent. So it's just
Yeah.
really interesting. People say I always find that interesting.
Yeah, no, I know. I always say, I tell people, I'm like, you wouldn't just tell someone you're going to North America. Like, more than often, you would not. You would tell them you're going to Canada, you're going to USA, you're going to Mexico, right? So I was like, it's the same thing when you say you're going to Africa. Like, you might get a couple looks just because it doesn't. You're going somewhere within. You don't really say you're going to the continent much. You say you're going to specific countries within that continent.
Exactly, exactly, exactly. So I just always find that kind of interesting. So my next question for you is, how have you intentionally showed up and helped to bring change in the world?
Yeah, I like to think that I think you're familiar with our work with Anti-Racist Midland. I like to think that's something that has brought change to the world, but I'll kind of backtrack and explain what it is. But
Sure.
so we started this group June 2020, in the midst of kind of the racial awakening, or whatever you want to call it, that our country had.
Yeah,
So we started this group called Anti-Racist Midland, otherwise known as ARM, and we were basically trying to bring reform and or diversity initiatives into the Midland area community, because as young people starting the group, that was something we had never experienced really in the Midland area. No, there wasn't much talk about it, and I think as we came together, we kind of realized, us as young adults and then some of us young students of color, never had come together to talk about it either, just because of the way the optics might look in town, if all these young Black
yeah,
kids are coming together to talk about this, right? So I think ARM has been a really good thing. We were able to release our oral history project, which we were thankfully part of, and get those stories out there. But we've also done a lot of reform with the school districts as well too. So I like to think we've made a small footprint, that hopefully will be carried out and continue to grow from there.
yeah. You guys most definitely did. It's I really love especially how you just mentioned the small footprint, because I think that people always look for, when you say how do you bring about change. People look at these people who are nationally known, or all over the world, and they're known that way, and we don't realize the importance of our small footprints, because even though we call them small, they're actually very grand, because it's a ripple effect, a domino effect of change. So, I mean, you all have done a lot to educate not only yourselves, your
Mhm.
peers, and the community in different ways. And some people will receive it and some people don't, but that's life. You know what I'm
Right.
saying?
Definitely. Yeah.
Be someone from the past or present, who would it be?
If I can meet someone from the past, I would say Frida Kahlo. I'm a
Ooh,
big art fan, and she's always been someone that I've been kind of weirdly obsessed with. I'm very into her, and I think she just was, she was a feminist back in the day too. She kind of had her, she always did her own thing. She kind of just,
yeah.
and I like that independent sense she seemed to have to her. In addition to that, I really, I think there's just a lot behind her art that I wish, I could talk to her about, and kind of, instead of having to infer it from my own, just kind of understand what she was thinking during the time too.
Yeah.
So I think that's one person. I just think she's the coolest person ever. So kind of a weird answer, I think, but that's definitely
No,
her.
I don't think it's weird at all. I'm definitely a creative, and I definitely love arts and artists, and it's a lot of them, and not just art with like paintings and things of that nature, but also musicians, artists that way. I'm really into that. And it's quite a few that I would love to have sat down with and really vibe with, to kind of pick their brain, because like you said, we're kind of left to our own interpretation, right?
Right.
When
Yeah.
people are already passive. Yeah. And to be able to sit with it down and just like vibe out and understand, like, kind of, or try to understand where they came from and what inspired like their music or their artwork, would be cool for me. So no, it's not weird at all.
Okay. Yeah, you don't think so, yeah. But yeah.
No, and I can tell it really brought you joy, because you kind of perked up when you talked about it. So that's
Yeah.
beautiful to me that she inspires you in such a way, for sure.
Yeah.
Last question for you is, and where did it go? There we are. If you had some words of encouragement to leave with us, what would they be?
Ooh, that's a good question. It's funny because I feel like I'm never one giving advice. I think I'm so young that I always get, I'm always the one asking for advice. But I think one thing that I think has been the motivational thing for me lately is just the quote, "What's meant for you won't miss you." I think that's something that I
Yes.
have been trying to listen to in my life a lot lately, just because, I'm always working towards something. I saw this thing on Twitter once, but it was just like the urge at 23 years old to feel like you need to have the entire world figured out, right? And I think that's something that I've been dealing with. So definitely
Yeah.
just knowing that what's meant for you won't miss you as long as you're working for it. If it's meant to be, it'll be, and if it's not meant to be, then it'll stay away from you. So definitely just continue to focus on what I need to do, and letting myself know that what's meant for me is going to happen, and keep that in mind.
Yes, and it is happening. You're doing some things too that, maybe 5 years ago, 10 years ago, you would have never even thought you were doing. So, I mean, it is happening for you. I always like to, and this is why I intentionally invited people, of your age demographic to come on too, because you all do have something to share with us. I always find it interesting when people say, they're our future and they're it's like they're here right now and you all have lived. It may not have been as long as somebody else, but you still had experiences that you can share
Mhm.
some type of advice with somebody that's, maybe 8, 9, 10, or 12, 15 that's about to graduate high school and have a couple questions. So, don't ever discount, what your value and what you bring to the world because you've been doing a lot in your
Mhm.
short years, so to speak.
It's nice to hear that from someone, yeah, but I definitely appreciate that because, yeah, there is that weird dynamic of sometimes where I'm like, I don't know if I should be the one giving advice or, receiving it because I'm in that, just started adulthood. So in theory, I've lived some life, but there's a lot more to go, hopefully. So,
Yeah, yeah, and there's some people that's 50, 60 years old that have not evolved at all. So, you just never know, and we definitely
Mhm.
are always evolving and growing. So we all should always want to be still, a student, so to speak, in this life and being able to, because none of us has mastered anything as of yet. But you definitely
Mhm.
have something to bring, and I always value that in people, despite where we are in life. All of us have something to bring, something that we've been through that we can share. So I appreciate everything that you're doing. I'm happy to hear
Thank
that
you.
you're in. I didn't know that you had moved to Boston, so that's pretty cool. Until
Yeah.
we, talked a little while ago. So that's amazing. So just keep doing what you're doing. You are definitely a light in this world, and
Thank you.
just keep doing it.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Yeah, you're welcome. So again, I appreciate you and thank you so much. Have a good rest of the weekend, and we'll talk
Mhm.
soon.
Okay, sounds good. Thanks for having me.
All right, take care.
Bye.
Thank you.